The honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My remarks today will be a bit of an homage to one of my favorite comedians and talk show hosts, David Letterman. And I want to be clear, there's nothing funny about homelessness, but there's so many reasons why Canada must enshrine in law the right to housing, and of course I only have a certain amount of time to speak today. So the format worked for me, sort of. And so what I'd like to share with everyone today is my top 11 reasons why Canada must enshrine the right to housing into Canadian law. Unlike David Letterman's top 10 list, my top 11 list is in no particular order. They're all equally important. The number one reason housing should be a right in Canada is because Housing First works. The idea of Housing First as a therapeutic intervention into people's lives was the result of the work by Canadian clinical psychologist from Montreal, Dr. Sam Semberis. Dr. Semberis noticed while practicing in New York City that the same people who were homeless were coming back over and over again to hospital for mental health services. And so he did a radical thing. He reached out to those who were more often than not consulted on homeless policies, people who were homeless, the individuals he was trying to help. Dr. Semberis then worked with other mental health professionals on a radical idea. What if we help people get off the street permanently by providing a place to live? The idea was simple. Once someone has a permanent home, they can focus on their mental health, their addiction, and their physical health. The model has been implemented all over the world, including in Canada, to great success. From the state of Utah that saw a reduction in homelessness by 92%, to Medicine Hat, Alberta, the first city in Canada to end homelessness. Housing First is more of a model than a program per se. In Canada, the Mental Health Commission of Canada's groundbreaking program, the At-Home Chez Soi project, built on the Housing First philosophy and the success of Dr. Semberis' work. As the name suggests, I believe Housing First uses a human rights lens to help people get and maintain a safe and affordable place to call home. This fundamental shift in thinking about how we intervene and help people is proven effective social policy. And if improving and saving people's lives wasn't enough, Housing First saves money too. In my own community of Saskatoon, Housing First, implemented by the United Way of Saskatoon and area in partnership with the Saskatoon Crisis Intervention Service, is saving lives and demonstrating cost savings by reducing dramatically the costs of emergency services. Journey Home is based on the Housing First philosophy. As the name suggests, the program helps people who have been chronically homeless to find and secure a home. The stability and safety of a home then allows people to focus on their healing journey. And the results have been amazing. In the first year alone, people helped by Journey Home saw an 82% drop in the use of high-cost emergency services like police, ambulance services, and emergency room visits. The social return on investment was calculated to be, for every dollar invested in the program, $2.23 was saved. One participant said of her involvement with Journey Home, Housing First saved my life. Reason number one is also reason number two, the rising cost of health care. What we see in the absence of affordable, safe, supportive housing is emergency rooms and hospital beds being the de facto frontline service provider. We can't afford this, and it doesn't work. Reason number three, because Diefenbaker would approve. In Prime Minister Diefenbaker's own words, and I quote, "However, the Bill of Rights has been drafted by men and will be applied and interpreted by men," and I'll add women, "who, notwithstanding their high offices in the executive and judicial branches of government, are human beings and therefore subject to error when judged by fundamental standards. In particular," he said, the Bill of Rights may, in the light of subsequent world developments, appear to have overlooked fundamental considerations. And B, the bill, as ultimately interpreted by the Supreme Court of Canada, may appear in one or more respects not to have been so worded as to achieve the desired results. Diefenbaker understood that the Canadian Bill of Rights, as originally drafted, may have missed something and would evolve over time. I often wonder, would Diefenbaker have imagined that during an economic boom in Saskatchewan, someone working full-time in Saskatoon had to live at the Salvation Army's men's shelter because they couldn't afford the cost of market rent. Reason number 4, communities need the consistency of long-term government policy. Enshrining the right to housing in law would allow communities the assurance of a consistent government policy framework in their efforts to end and prevent homelessness. All across Canada, community leaders, frontline service providers, municipal governments have stepped up to address homelessness with resounding success. But they can't do it on their own. They need long-term commitments from government to continue their great work. Many a great community effort that improved the quality of life ends up wasted because a government changes and all that great work is no longer a priority for the new government. Resources are wasted, lives are disrupted, and communities find themselves often going back to square one. Reason number 5, because sometimes government policy or the lack thereof actually creates homelessness. Good government policy in ending homelessness and preventing it needs to be incorporated across government departments. Otherwise, great policy develops in isolation and can have unintended consequences. I'll share one personal example. When I was involved in the Saskatoon point-in-time count in Saskatoon, I received a call from a social worker at a local hospital. She wanted me to know that if we included the elderly people that were currently in the hospital as homeless, our numbers of homeless people would have been much higher. She went on to explain that a high number of beds in the hospital were currently being occupied by elderly patients who, if they had a place to go, a suitable home, they would not be in the hospital. And these patients and people did not want to be in the hospital. A hospital bed is not a home. Government policy and government systems need to work together better. Number 6 of my top 10 reasons for making housing a right in Canada is because we owe it to the next generation. There are more children in foster care in Canada now than there were children in the Indian residential school system. A colleague of mine called the foster care system the superhighway to homelessness for youth. Young people are homeless for very different reasons than adults. More often than not, young people are living on the street because of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse at home. And I think we can all agree that every young person in Canada deserves a safe, supportive home. Reason number 7, we are in a housing crisis and we need to do things differently. The rise in the cost of housing is outpacing the rise in incomes in Canada. We often hear that Canadians are holding more personal debt than ever, and many Canadians are one paycheck away from not being able to meet their monthly expenses. We must address this issue. We must do something radically different. The solutions of the past aren't going to work in this new reality. In the Hill Times article on September 18th, Tim Richter, the CEO of the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, and Jacqueline Neiman, CEO of the United Way of Centraide Canada, put it this way: changing times require policy innovation that moves beyond replicating past initiatives. Enshrining the right to housing in law could be that innovation that is needed in these changing times. Reason number 8, because I believe Canada's signature on a piece of paper is worth something. In 1976, Canada signed on to the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and so many legal experts would say we have committed to enshrining it into domestic law, the right to housing. And we have seen Canada's international rights regularly referred to in decisions made by our domestic courts. Mr. Speaker, let me close with my last 3 reasons that housing as a right be enshrined in law. And those last 3 reasons are Ashley Belanger, David Finday, and Alvin Cote. Ashley, David, and Alvin all experienced homelessness in my city of Saskatoon. Ashley and David shared their expertise, their lived experiences with me and others when I was the CEO of the United Way. Their generosity and intelligence, their willingness to share what they knew are the reasons why Saskatoon began to work as a community on homelessness and invest in housing first and save lives. And finally, the first planning process to end homelessness in Saskatoon was dedicated to Alvin Cote, And so I will end with the dedication to Alvin and look forward to Saskatoon's first ever plan to end homelessness. The Saskatoon Plan to End Homelessness, designed to provide safe homes and a new future for Saskatoon's most vulnerable residents, is dedicated to the memory of Alvin Cote. A proud member of Cote First Nation, Alvin spent his life on the streets of Saskatoon. After facing unimaginable hardships as a child, a conventional life was too much to manage, and he lost himself in alcohol. This placed him outside the reach of most supports. The Plan to End Homelessness aims to provide options for others like him so everyone can make a journey home.
Reprise du débat. L'honorable